kills me, and I think probably more than anything, this is why I love working with this population. I have heard so many times. Well, the last time I had this discussion, I said, we've talked about this a whole lot, but I got to bring it up, and I know you're tired of hearing it, but I'm your friend. So I just got to say it bluntly. You stink. You smell bad. And you're going into a theater with a lot of people, and you're asking for roles. And it's worrying me because I don't think you're going to get them. People make judgments about that. Davis, my dad says that. They do not. The world's not like that. I can't believe you are so cynical. And that's what just kicks my heart. We are that cynical. We are that cynical. We do. Yes. You know, the person that's 5 minutes late is not going to be given the same attention as the person who was 5 minutes early. We do make those judgments. We do. So it just kills me to have to say, oh, but we are that cynical. But for students to move through all the privileges that we have, they have to know that. Which brings me to one more point. Somewhere around 22 or 23, it seems to me, I watched this happen over and over and over. They seem to have reached a maturity level and seen enough of that they're beginning to believe that, there are impressions that I don't get that other people do get. And they start asking me about it. This happens almost across the board, somewhere around 21 or 22. If they matriculate to their senior year, you'll start to hear it. And then if you follow them, you'll see from their parents or whatever, yeah, he's living in an independent apartment now. That's what makes the difference. Just belief that people do get impressions that you don't always understand. That's the only thing I've found that makes the social realm possible to navigate for someone with Asperger.
Do you think it's a brain maturation? Or
yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's developmentally appropriate. I do. I think it's developmentally appropriate that it happens someplace around 21, 22. I think it happens for most people. The world kind of expands. You begin to understand that, oh, what I did today is not separate from that thing tomorrow. It's all one big thing. Students with Asperger's begin to get that hint, and they begin to understand that, the social realm has portions of it that I don't understand. Because then you start getting questions. And once they start asking those questions, now you're beginning to assess the social realm. At first, they seem to begin, when they start trying to assess it, that there's nothing to assess. It's literal. It's as literal as I say it is, and it's literal because I say it is. It's that inability to put yourself in the exterior world. That's one thing I like about the population of students. They have just rich, vibrant inner lives, and they're not able to project that into a social sphere, or not with ease. And they try.
One of the things that, one of the ones I went through, they were talking about students in just an academic performance, that they're usually pretty good at the class with the stuff they care about. They get these sessions about computers or, whatever they're studying. But they've talked a lot about the general education requirements, the classes that everybody has to take that may or may not be their interest. What's your experience then with sort of, cajoling these people along in courses that they're having a hard time sort of getting jazzed about?
To the extent we can, we try to keep the focus on academics in our offices. Of course, that's impossible. That's just impossible because the social realm so intrudes on that for these students. I would say better than 3/4 of the students, by their sophomore year, if they can get to their sophomore year, they can run. They can begin to matriculate on it. They've discovered how that can be done. Some of them will bring their syllabi to us. We try to get them to. We'll go through it with a fine-tooth comb. We'll go over instructions with them because that is a real difficulty. And this is another little difficulty I have. Well, Davis, I don't want that. Oh my God, this happens so much. I don't want to do it that way. It would be so much more interesting and look so much cooler if I did it this way. And you're thinking in your head, yes, it would. But you don't get to. You just don't get to. It's got to be done this way for a grade. And, and then you get that hateful question, why? There's no pretty answer to that. There's just not a pretty answer to that. Well, because the professor said to, and you bought this course. So what I try to get students to do, I'm thinking about taking your class next semester. Could you give me a copy of the syllabi? Sometimes they don't have it ready. Then could you email me a copy? I stuttered when I went to college, and I did this for every course I took because I was freaking out about who I was going to have to speak in front of. So I really push students to do that. Then they can come to me early. We can sit down and I'll say, well, there's going to be this assignment, and this is going to have 5 parts. Well, how do you feel about following these directions? What's that going to be like for you, when you begin to organize it? I'll be glad to help you if you want to take the course. But I would think about it because you've also got this other class that you don't like. If you can do that, it's difficult because they are challenged by time constraints. And having said all this to y'all, I have to tell you, they have a freedom that I envy like a thief. I just have to tell you, they just do. That's why I like that population, and I think that's why it's so important that we at least touch on what allows us to kind of tighten their world, because that is what we're doing. We're tightening it and constraining it from what's natural to them. Most students will tell you, actually, and the first student with Asperger's I ever worked with actually told me that. I can't think like a person who doesn't have Asperger's. It is just not natural to me in any way. That's why I came to you. That's what he said. And I think that's probably the closest to the truth I've ever heard. It's an act of will to sort of curb that freedom. We all do it. We do it as a matter of, moving in society. We've been raised since birth to do it. These are students who lack that mechanism that allows us to do it. They lack that to some extent, or completely in the case of autism. Does that make sense? Let me see what else. Let me give you a copy of a faculty letter, because in the same way, the assignments, following through, language is a fascinating thing. And if you don't know the ways that it can be symbolic, that it can be metaphorical, that it can be figurative, students sit down with it and they read, how can I put this? I can't think of an example off the top of my head, okay? But they're reading a piece of fiction, let's say, okay? And it does have a metaphorical reference in it, okay? Jack was a bear. Their first instinct, and the only instinct they have, is to picture this man as a hairy dude. So it says. There's no urge to take it anything other than literally. Does that make sense?
So Jack is a bear.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I found out this the hard way, because I know I talk in metaphors all the time in my office. Well, it's kind of like if students with Asperger's can't go there. They just cannot do that. They can't make those metaphorical references. They know those things literally, okay? But it just doesn't work, those metaphorical references. And so they get stuck. I think oftentimes it's called obsessive-compulsive disorder, and oftentimes it is, okay? But sometimes they just get stuck there. I mean, it's a whole new thing to just, read literally that, okay, a man is a bear. I mean, they have no other way of processing that information. Does that make sense? So I think that plays in it too. But yes, I've seen with lots of students. Baseball cards. Oh my gosh. Yes, anime. And I've yet to wrap my head around completely why that is so fascinating. 2 students have told me, well, Davis, it's so obvious, what their expressions are. You're kind of told, in the anime character, what to think, what to feel. It's very simplistic. So it seems to speak to the very things that they're not good at, I want to tell you